Everyone, it's Roger here from What's On at disneyplus.com, and I'm here with Greg to talk about a number of Disney projects that he's been working on, including T.O.T.S and also Puppy Dog Pals, and also some other things that he has been working on. So, Greg, do you want to give us an idea of what you've been working on recently?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Greg Nicolett, a composer for a lot of different genres of stuff, but just over the last several years, a lot of it's been work at Disney. I sort of got invited to audition on a project called Goldie Bear through a friend of mine, Rob Cantor, and it's sort of I feel like every composer's initial success story is a mix of completely unrepeatable luck. Right, like Rob Cantor is perhaps best well known for his viral video he did a little ways back now called "Actual Cannibal Shia LaBeouf," which I helped him out on with the orchestration. He wrote the song and the lyrics, and I helped him make it epic by writing the string quartet parts, writing the choir parts, things like that. And that song did so well, it got him some attention at Disney. They were also sort of aware of his Tally Hall background, and I had gone to school with Rob. So when it came down to when he got a show there, he introduced me as a possible composer for that show, and then that led to lots of projects. Working with Rob, you mentioned Puppy Dog Pals. The lead composer on that show is Andy Bean, who writes both the score and the songs, and I was jumping on board that one to write additional music. We later went on to do T.O.T.S together, Rob, Greg Jenkins, and I as another composer, and then I'm also on board for our latest show called Pupstruction.
Oh, so that's it's quite kind of funny because you kind of touched on a couple of questions there. But so, what was your influence, kind of getting into composing to begin with?
I was a weird kid. I always loved film soundtracks. I didn't always know I loved film soundtracks. What's that?
I was exactly the same. My first CD was the Star Wars soundtrack.
Right. I mean, it doesn't make you a popular kid, but it was something that I liked a lot. I remember blaring, like, I would get into the same mischief that anybody would, blaring, other genres of music. It's just that, like, I would crash my car while listening to the Batman soundtrack rather than, Rage Against the Machine. So same rebellious tendencies, just different genres. So I was always interested in film soundtracks, but I would say I was also just as interested in the movies, because what I was really chasing as a kid were those goosebumps you felt, watching a scene from a movie that you really resonate with. And as a kid, of course, all your emotions are heightened, and so when I would get a hold of these soundtracks, I felt like I could recreate that same feeling I got from the movies listening to the music. And then eventually that sort of clicked as I got into high school band and choir and things like that, I could write this music if I wanted to. And one of the first projects that I worked on sort of unofficially was we did a feature-length parody of The Phantom Menace in high school. We all hated the film so much that we decided the best way to heal was to make a feature-length parody of it. And so I wrote some tracks for that. And then eventually I just kind of kept, I minored in film in college and scored my own movies that I was directing. And then, decided I just wanted to pursue film music almost exclusively.
That's cool. So how do you kind of come up with like an overall feel if you're coming up with like one of the the shorts or one of the Disney animated shows?
That's the hardest part. I mean, the overall feel is where that's where you audition. That's how you audition to get the show. It's where all the creative decisions are made. All that work, 90% of the work is done in a way in advance, and all the sort of creative trial and error happens before the show has aired. And so how do I come up with it? I mean, it's a combination of conversations with the creators, considering the overall tone of the show. The audience is important. Most of my work before I got into Disney was live action. A lot of short films, a lot of indie films. Some went to Sundance, some were on HBO. They were all very, they took themselves very seriously. They were for an adult audience, right? And my instincts working on those films, honestly, were completely different than what I bring to the Disney projects because of the audience. The audience for the shows that I'm working on is 2 to 7 years old about. I'm sure there are some older people who watch these shows too, but the main audiences are young kids. And I remember one of my first meetings, a couple things happened during one of my first meetings when I presented my first pass on a score. One of the executives looked at me and said, well, first, you're not hitting any of the jokes. and I was, okay, well, what do you mean by hitting the jokes? Because what I was doing a more, maybe let's say a more adult method of scoring by staying out of the way of a lot of the humor, maybe pausing and letting the jokes kind of land and carry themselves. But for this show, they really wanted me to sort of accentuate the fact that this was a comedic moment. So literally hit them, right? And then also we got to the end of the episode and the executive glared at me and said, "You did not score the moral." I'm like, "Wait, what? The moral, the moral of the story. You didn't score it." And then again, it was this moment where it's like, okay, right. Like if this were an adult show, I wouldn't necessarily be hitting the audience over the head with a very, emotional piece of music. But for a kid's show, you do want to sort of accompany that. You do want to tell the kids that this is the wrap up of the story. This is, what you should be taking away from the story as a lesson. And it isn't over the top in a show like that. It's exactly where it should be for a kid's cartoon. So sort of recalibrating those instincts was definitely part of my journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it makes a lot of sense with how you're kind of explaining if essentially you had to like learn how to do it for sort of children's content. So that definitely makes
and these executives they know their audience better than I do, because they participate in focus groups. They see these kids watching the shows, and I'm actually a parent now, but I wasn't for the majority of my time. So I definitely took their cues and just believe them when they said this is what kids like. I mean,
it's that kind of thing as well. I can imagine it's that thing of they know that you've kind of got the skills to do it. It's just teaching you how to do it. And like you say, you've worked on now so many different shows, so that's good. So what's been one of your highlights for working with Disney?
Highlights. Well, honestly, this is a cop-out answer, but I always, on a TV show, you do a lot of work, like a lot of episodes, right? I mean, each season is 25 episodes long, and there'll be multiple seasons. Goldie ran 2 seasons, T.O.T.S ran 3 seasons, and so when you get to episode 50, sometimes you start to make it. Sometimes it starts to feel like a job, right? And so one of the ways that I sort of shock myself into realizing that that's not what it is just take a step back, appreciate the animation, appreciate just the amount of artistry in every single episode that I get a hold of. Making every episode a highlight is sort of my job, right? I have to always fall in love with both the series I'm working on, and then if I find myself getting, if I'm getting bored or if I'm getting, my creative ideas are stale, I have to push the envelope a little bit. I have to, use a different instrument. I have to maybe learn how to play a different instrument for that episode, or work with a musician that might bring a flavor to it. So I have to sort of make it a special occasion sometimes. And, and it's always better for it. I guess a specific highlight, let me see. There's been a lot of guest stars, and I need to look something up, but the character actor who played the big bad wolf on Goldie and Bear he's just I'm gonna find it. He's just so accomplished in the cinema, Jim Cummings.
Oh,
he's done so many projects, so many movies. I think he's in the Shrek movies, right? Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
So I was just working with people like that. And then of course on that show as well, since it's a fairy tale based show, getting to write themes for like the fairy godmother or other iconic fairy tale characters like the giants, like just being able to write themes that are associated with those characters was pretty thrilling. Yeah,
that definitely sounds like you say that. You said his name, it was like, oh yeah, Winnie the Pooh. So that's pretty cool. So are there any future Disney projects that you can tell us you're currently working on?
You mean feature films?
Or future projects?
Oh, well, Pupstruction, like I mentioned, I can't talk too much about it. It has been announced. I am doing the score for it. Rob Cantor again doing the songs. It's same creative team for the most part as T.O.T.S. It was created by Travis Braun, and it's great. It's about Finny, who's a dog. It's the whole show is about an all dog construction crew, as you can imagine, Pupstruction. Yeah. And Finny though is a smaller dog, and so his father's a little nervous. Maybe he's not, cut out for this job, and so this is part of his story, just proving that he can do the job, and then also just in general the show is going to be really really get kids excited about building things, about creating things in the real world. And I think it'll get kids asking a lot of like interesting questions from their parents about how did that get made, and what material is that. I think those are all really positive questions.
And also, we're just with having cute dogs and knowing how my nephews were with both with Puppy Dog Powers and also Paw Patrol. Yeah, that's hopefully going to be a big one.
Yeah, this will be my second dog show we're working on. So I guess I'm getting typecast into that genre of kids shows. But sorry.
Are there any other projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah. One of the biggest projects that I've worked on to date is actually a video game for it's a score for a video game called Potionomics. Been working on that for 4 or 5 years, and it's just finally been, we're about 2 weeks from release. What's the date today? The 11th. We're less than a week from release. It comes out on the 17th on Steam, so it'll be a PC game initially. It's that game too has sort of like a Disney Pixar art style to it, and the developer really wanted that music to sort of fit into that aesthetic, and so he was willing to, even though we're an indie team, he was willing to give me enough of a budget to work with a live orchestra, also a lot of different soloists. So it's a big project, a lot of musicians involved, lots of music. Soundtrack for that will be out the same day, by the way, in case you're curious, on Spotify and Apple Music. So
that's cool. And have you worked on any other video games in the past?
A couple. I did some orchestrations on a Star Wars game that got canceled, actually. Disney Connected Ventures, I did a lot of orchestrations on. Yeah, that was way back Xbox, but
I remember buying that one.
it was, so I've sort of always had, I guess, a Disney connection. A couple indie games before that got canceled, or at least postponed, and that's always hard when you've sort of put a lot of energy into something and then it just maybe doesn't wrap up, or is it postponed indefinitely. But that's pretty common for indie video games. The lift it takes to get something off the ground can be pretty massive.
And can you kind of, in some ways, maybe like reuse some of that music because you've not used it, or depends on kind of the contracts and stuff, I suppose?
Depends on the contracts. It's funny. My dad always asks me that. He's always trying to be very practical. Like, can't you just reuse your themes and no, just reuse the track from the old show? I'm like, yeah, it doesn't. It seems like it makes sense, but it's amazing how much a score really is tailored just for that specific project, right? I mean, it really is. Ideally, if you're doing your job right, then the music you're writing is glued to that project in a lot of different ways, emotionally, creatively, sound palette wise. It's unique for that project. You might be able to reuse melodies from time to time, or chord progressions, like more foundational stuff, but the track itself tends to be very much like for that project alone. And also, like, these games, even though they got maybe postponed or canceled, I don't want to necessarily disrespect the developers and just throw it into another project, because these are people that I want to work with again, and maybe the game will come out. One thing I am considering doing is releasing some of those soundtracks, just so they're out there in the world. But yeah, I don't tend to reuse too much stuff.
No. What's the kind of the difference in kind of making sort of music for a video game compared to like one of the Disney shows? Because I play a lot of video games myself, and kind of like music's so different in how they are in video games.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how certain genres of music and even certain tempos and pacing sort of finds their way into different mediums. I mean, sometimes it seems a little arbitrary, but not necessarily. Video game music tends to be faster, it tends to be bolder, it tends to be more in your face, and it makes sense why. I mean, the games themselves, there's a lot going on. If it's an action game, there's a lot of sound effects as well. There's a lot of action on screen, so of course the music's going to be bigger. In general, the differences are video game music tends to be more. I tend to be able to write more music that stands alone on its own. I tend to be able to write stronger melodies, tracks that provide better listens, because I'm not always boxed into the scene, right? The timing of the scene, the dialogue, the action of the scene is all very linear, right? But in games, it's all happening more, like the time scales are just longer. So you may be in a certain place in the game for 6 minutes, right? So if I write a 2-minute, 3-minute piece of music that loops 2 or 3 times, that's not an unwelcome scenario. But in film or TV, a scene usually doesn't last that long, and so the piece of music doesn't really get a chance to develop as interestingly. So you see, in a way, like better. Not I don't want to say better, but the music just tends to be able to breathe more in games than in film and TV. There are a couple, if you don't mind me going on, there are a couple.
Yeah, you carry on.
Yeah, there are a couple practical considerations with games that I want to keep in mind that are similar to film, where I got Potionomics. The developer really wanted memorable themes for every character in the game, and I was really all for that. But I'm also sort of conscious of the fact that if you are listening to a piece of music on loop for maybe 8 minutes, and that piece of music's only 2 minutes long, will that melody get on your nerves after the third or fourth or fifth time, right? Because melodies tend to be earworms, which is great, but because they're earworms, they're in a way they call more attention to themselves, and maybe they get a little repetitive and grating. So one of the things I'm conscious of is maybe programming the music in such a way that the melody only plays the first time, and then you get a break, and maybe it'll come back the fourth time, right? So just so you have sort of a nice balance between the music that's more in your face and music that's a little bit more ambient. And then there's also just one more thing, just the dynamic nature of games where you don't necessarily know the timing of the player's input. Again, on Potionomics, the developer didn't want to have any scripted events, meaning he wanted every piece of dialogue to be interactable. So you'd have to click through each phrase, right? Which meant from a music perspective, I could never know how long a piece of music needed to be, right? So I had to be able to change. I'd write music in such a way for certain scenes that could change to other pieces of music seamlessly, or at least mostly seamlessly at any point. And that's a whole other challenge too, because that determines the kind of music you're writing, maybe the musical keys you're choosing, again, whether a melody is present or not. So it's a very different process.
Yeah, because that was the thing that always got me, was like, when you play in a game and you go into a different area, or if you meet suddenly a different boss, or and like you say, the transitions between them have to be so different to like a series and stuff. So that was definitely so you were like, you hit on quite a few of the questions, because I was just well, how does that? No, because it's great, because as like I said, I mean, I remember buying like the Super Mario and the Sonic the Hedgehog on vinyl when I was a kid with my pocket money, kind of thing, because I always liked the music from games and Street Fighter. And so, like, obviously, like, yeah, you, like you say, you really hit on a few points there, like, well, how, like you said, the transition and the speed, and the cutscene stuff. So no, that was, it was really interesting, because as I said, as a video game fan that's listened to soundtracks, it's like, oh yeah, I could see how that's really cool.
Yeah, different games work differently too, because if you play a game like Ori and the Blind Forest, where they do use more cinematically timed events, where you lose control for a while and you just watch it play out, and there you can kind of score it like a film or TV episode, because you know exactly what the timings are. But it really depends on the gameplay style and the
and those two games are amazing as well, those Ori games. But yeah, so I've got to ask you, going back on to kind of the Disney side, is there any franchises that you'd like to tackle that Disney also own?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, well, I got into this for all the same reasons probably a lot of folks my age get into them, which was falling in love with Star Wars, falling in love with superhero movies as a kid. Tim Burton's '89 Batman that I mentioned earlier was a big influence, the original Star Wars movies. Now that Disney basically owns, they don't own Batman per se, but they own Marvel, and they own Lucasfilm now. I mean, I would absolutely love to contribute in any small way to the Star Wars or Marvel universes. We'll see. It's one of those things where having work as a composer is I'm incredibly grateful, because I have a very competitive field. One thing that does tend to happen is when you get into a certain track, especially within a production company, is that you sort of get well known for those kinds of shows. So I am blessed with a lot of work in the Disney Kids shows. So people aren't necessarily knocking on my door to do Star Wars or Marvel films, but it's up to me to sort of show that I can handle that and meet the right people, and that's an ongoing project for me.
And also, I mean, you've got now like with Marvel's Spidey and His Amazing Friends, and the upcoming like Young Jedi Adventures and stuff. There are ways as well. Kind of, I'd hope that you could maybe flex a little bit that side as well, because then we got Marvel's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur coming up from Disney as well. So hopefully, fingers crossed. If you
know more than I do. I can listen to your podcast.
Unfortunately, I'm full of useless information like that. So final question, really, and I ask this to all of our guests. What has been your favorite Disney Plus original so far?
Disney Plus specifically? I mean, for me, my favorite Disney series would have to be Gravity Falls. I don't know if it's Disney. I mean, it is. I think it is on Disney.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. Yeah.
I mean, can I talk about?
You go for it.
Okay.
You go for it.
Well, I would say from a cartoon perspective, Gravity Falls for me. I just love everything about that show. The humor, the fact that it works on multiple levels. Like kids can enjoy it, adults can love it. The music's got just this really it's sort of orchestral, but it uses synths in really interesting and fun ways. Like the art style, it was such a pioneer when it came out that again for me it just really resonated with me. I know I feel like that's probably my favorite animated show. Otherwise, I quite liked a lot about Obi-Wan, the new Star Wars show. I haven't seen Andor yet. I feel like that's going to be might be my favorite Star Wars series. I'm not sure yet, just because for me, Rogue One was the peak for me of the new Star Wars films, and I just absolutely loved that film. I didn't care for the new trilogy quite as much, and so I think Andor might be my favorite, but otherwise, Obi-Wan. With an honorable mention to WandaVision, which I thought was just also completely unexpected and brilliant.
Yeah,
how about you? What's your favorite?
Well, it's kind of difficult. I mean, I would definitely. I mean, the Mandalorian always kind of comes up as like an easy kind of first one because of the first season was so great. I just love that one there, and Andor is kind of already kind of going up there because it's such a different tone. Like you say, it's more adult, and I think that definitely works for it. Also really loved Loki. Loki was a highlight for me personally, but yeah, it's like there's so much stuff out there, and it is like you say, and I especially now, like we're speaking with a number of different composers and stuff, it's great to kind of, listen to all the soundtracks while I'm doing my editing and bits and pieces. So I'm totally in on this all the side. So it's always great to kind of get a little bit of an insight into what
are some of your favorite soundtracks from Disney Plus?
Well, I really have. I think for at the minute, like the Mandalorian one, obviously is great.
Oh, yeah,
you got that tone, and you can get the bass on it, and all the rest of it. Yeah, WandaVision was great as well because obviously the different you had those different episodes, different eras. So like and as kind of someone a little bit old, I kind of grew up with different eras of sitcoms, so I kind of really enjoyed the different themes.
I really appreciated Michael Giacchino did that, right? No, who?
It was the ones that did Frozen. They did.
It was Buffy composer. Which I'm blanking on. What's his name?
Yeah, I've got a blank.
I will find that because that's important. But he, I really appreciated during the like the 90s sitcom that he used all these really old, terrible, like synthesized MIDI sounds that did not, like there's no nostalgia for them. They're all just sort of bad samples of sounds that we've improved upon now, and they're not even synths. They were just like the really crappy clarinet sound that nobody uses from some Roland synth. That he used them all in those episodes. I don't know if you noticed that, but it was
it's like you said, it's those little touches that make it feel like it, and especially if you remember that era, you kind of pick up on stuff like that, and it's kind of almost subconscious. But no, it's been great. It's been great speaking to you about all of these different projects. And so your new video game is out this week, and you can find that one on stream on PC.
Is it this week? It's next Monday.
Next Monday. So you'll be able to pick that one up on Steam. And on that note, guys, thank you so much for taking your time out, and we'll speak to you guys soon. Later.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure you go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. Also, a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and also on our YouTube channel memberships. And I shall see you guys in another video. Laters.